Once again, this is Lindsey Graham saying that because of what's happening right now in Palestine, that they should go and bomb the Iranians. Okay?
In the last hour, announcing it's going to begin to execute hostages and post video evidence online for every Israeli airstrike. Your thoughts on this moment, Senator?
Well, for every Israeli or American hostage executed by Hamas, we should take down an Iranian oil refinery. The only way you're going to keep this war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable. How much more death and destruction do we have to take from the Iranian regime? I am confident.
I feel like this guy's dementia is starting to set in, and he doesn't know what war they're discussing. And he's just like, he threw an American hostage in there, even though there's like there are no American hostages. He just threw it in there. It's like it's a gag reflex.
This was planned and funded by the Iranians. Hamas is a bunch of animals who deserve to be treated like animals. So,
very interesting language, because he's not the only one to say that word today. So the Israeli defense minister said, actually, he didn't just mean Hamas. He said that all Palestinians, right, are human animals. I'll get to his clip in a second, okay?
Hamas is a bunch of animals who deserve to be treated like animals. So if I was Israel, I would go in on the ground.
You're literally Israel, but okay. Why don't you go ahead, Senator? Let's see you go first. Number one, give first in line.
No truce to be had here. I would dismantle Hamas. This is the best opportunity Israel has to destroy Hamas. Take it to the Iranians. If you harm one American in Syria by using your Iranian militia against us in
what? Well, you could leave Syria. That's just an option. I'm just putting that out there. You don't actually have to be in Syria. You do realize that's not your country, yeah?
Syria. If you escalate the war by urging Hezbollah to attack Israel in the north, if Hamas kills one American or Israeli hostage, we're going to blow up your oil refineries and put you out of business. It is now time to take the war to the Ayatollah's back.
He's just blabbing, because I saw that there are 10 Americans that have been killed. I don't know if they're Israeli Americans. I don't know if they're tourists. I have no clue. So if that were true, they would have already done something, okay? But I want to point out something interesting, because while it is true that Iran and Hamas are allies, I thought that the Iranians only support Shia militias, right? Hamas is nothing to do with that. Hamas are a Sunni Muslim, and they're Muslim Brotherhood. Checkmate, dumbass. So what Graham, and I swear to God, you can go and find these statements if you want. And if it's not him, you can go and find them from Blinken or Biden or whatever. It doesn't matter what party they're in. They will always come back and say the Iranian or the Iranian-backed Shia militias, right? They always say this, the Shia militias. Well, what does that have to do with Hamas then? Are they Shia all of a sudden? Do you see how this doesn't make any sense? Like, their understanding of the Middle East is it's ignorant and it's flawed, right? It's ignorant and it's flawed. And because before they would say, well, there's a rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran because of the fact that Saudi Arabia is Sunni and because Iran is Shia. Well, that's not true, because there is no rivalry. They made a peace this year. They normalized ties. As a matter of fact, it was the Chinese who mediated that, right? So obviously this doesn't play a role in anything. And you've had, the Iranians visiting Saudi Arabia and vice versa, and everything's okay. And Hamas is another example of this. And I've said this many times before. So I find this interesting that now they're like putting Iran into this. Now, here's the thing. Does Iran have anything to do with what's happening right now in Palestine? Yes and no. The Iranians have not they don't send their own people there. It's just a long-standing policy that they are going to support whoever in the region. Doesn't matter, again, Sunni, Shia, literally makes no difference. Syria is a secular state, for example. It's a secular country, Syria. Iran supports Syria. Venezuela is in Latin America. It's not Muslim. It's nothing to do with that, right? It's not Shia. It's nothing to do with this dichotomy. Oh, it's either Shia or Sunni. They still support Venezuela. Hamas is another example of this. How it does this plays absolutely no role. So what's happened here is that this operation that which is called Al-Aqsa Flood. Okay, so Aqsa is the mosque in Jerusalem. They call it Dome of the Rock in English sometimes. Okay, so they named the operation after that. Okay, which again shows you that this is about how the Israelis, they are not only mistreating people in Gaza and besieging Gaza, but it's also got to do with their policies of constantly going into the Aqsa Mosque and tear gassing people, especially during Ramadan, and it's many things, right? This is the entire conflict since '48. That's what this is right now. You're seeing the anger that's accumulated from that coming out. So what's happened is that this operation is very, very successful from an intelligence standpoint, from a military standpoint. It's been executed flawlessly. The Israelis never saw, they had no clue what hit them. They never saw this coming. Never. Now, there's some Israelis who think that, well, obviously, Israel took down the security fence, which they spent billions, investing in, and digging several meters underground, and putting up, even to the point that it's in the goddamn sea, in the sea. That they think that the Israelis let Hamas come inside, so Netanyahu would have an excuse to go to war with Palestine. He doesn't need an excuse. They do it all the time. Like, do these people watch the news? Do you even watch the news? You think that the Israelis allowed this to happen? Don't stop giving them so much credit. The Israelis are not God. They like to think that they're God, but they're not. The Israelis they are stupid. They're arrogant. They let their guard down, and Hamas took advantage of that. And after all, this is their right. It's their country. This is not this fence is a fence. It's not a border. If I come into your house and I erect a fence, and I start trying to, carve up your house, you're not going to recognize whatever the hell it is I'm doing there, right? You're just going to blast me away and kick my ass. That's what you would do, because I came into your house. The Israelis came into the Palestinians' house. It's their house. You cannot go on somebody else's home turf and win. This is not the first time that something like this happens. This is, very reminiscent of the Tet offensive in January 1968. So this was, Tet it's kind of the opposite, right? Because 50 years ago, almost to the day, you had the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and that's a holiday for Jews. When it comes to the Tet offensive, it was not a holiday for the Americans, it was a holiday for the Vietnamese. But nevertheless, they took advantage of this, and the Americans had their guard down because they thought, oh, well, everybody's out celebrating or something. They're not going to bother attacking us. No, they bothered. They bothered very much, in fact, to do so. And they took the Americans by surprise and kicked their ass. The same thing you could say with Dien Bien Phu, although I mention that just because it's Vietnam and because the Vietnamese crushed the French, although that one had less to do with the element of surprise. If you want to talk about the element of surprise, which this very much is about, then the Tet offensive would be a great analogy. So this is really, really embarrassing for the Israelis. So don't let them, don't give them credit and think, oh, well, they allowed this. No, there are psyops. You do have things where, the CIA will go and do something that is against American interests so they can justify doing something. Yes, you have these in politics. This is not one of them. This is not one of them. This is a huge victory for the global South. It's a victory for colonized people. So everybody who's been colonized or is living under colonialism still is looking at this and thinking, wow, maybe I can also overthrow the guy who's taken my home and taken my land and taken my resources and boxed me in. Remember, Niger just kicked out the French, right? So that's another victory, an anti-colonial fight that the Nigerians took to the French and won. It's not a good year for colonizers. It's not a good year to be a colonizer. And the Israelis are colonizers, make no mistake.